Welcome to episode 119 of the Sports Geek Podcast. This week I chat sports and sales with Bob Hamer.
Welcome to the Sports Geek Podcast, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals.
And now, here's your host who's currently checking his Snapchat, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. I do check my Snapchat, but I do put my phone away when I start a podcast, but you can send me a snap. I have had a few listeners sending me snaps of either their phone, which is a bit tough, or their car radio or anything like that when they are listening to the podcast. So please send me a snap. Sean Callanan is my Snapchat handle, funnily enough, or Sports Geek HQ. You can also send the snaps there. My name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek, and you are listening to the Sports Geek Podcast. You're doing that on iTunes or Stitcher or SoundCloud or my favourite podcast app, Pocket Casts. Let me know what channel you're using to listen to podcasts. I'm always really interested in knowing what app you're using, but I'm also really interested in what other podcasts you're listening to. I'm a big podcast listener, and I'm always looking for new podcasts. So send me in the podcasts. As I've done earlier, I've reviewed and pointed people to other podcasts to listen to. You got Troy Kirby with the Tower of Sports. Adam Martin does the Makers of Sport. If you're really into your design and your sports design, Adam's podcast is a great one, and there is plans for us to do a podcast together in the very near future. So if you're listening to both of our podcasts, you are in for a treat. And I think there's some real opportunities in the space, and some great podcasts out there. Some that are off the beaten path from a sports point of view. I'm a big fan. I'm just going to don't normally do this. I'm going to open up my phone and I'm going to tell you what kind of podcasts are sitting in my podcast app. I'm a big fan of the Startup Podcast from Gimlet Media. That's in my always download. And speaking of downloads, another podcast that I really do like. It's called Download This Show. It's an Australian podcast, but it's from Radio National, from Mark Fennell, and really looks into the week in technology and culture and the like. So they're always looking at what's the latest in social and digital and things like that. So it's always an interesting discussion. And I've been listening to a little bit of the DigiDay podcast, picking and choosing a few of those as I go. But if there is one that I'm pointing people to at the minute, I'm pointing people to the recent podcast that Bill Simmons did with Chris Sacca. Chris Sacca is one of the early investors of companies you may have heard of, Twitter, Airbnb, Uber, and the discussion that Bill Simmons had on his podcast with Chris Sacca is, right up there. It's in the top 5 of podcasts for mine from an episode point of view. Right up there. If you've heard me rave about Tim Ferriss's podcast with Arnold Schwarzenegger, I would put that Chris Sacca one right up there as a really quality podcast and well worth a listen. So that's it. That's enough of the podcast review, because you've come here to listen to this podcast. And so this week I caught up with Bob Hamer from Sports Biz Solutions about his background, both in the NBA as far as working at the Phoenix Suns, but then also what he's doing now with Sports Biz Solutions in helping teams to sell. So it's a real hark back to episode 60 with Katie Morgan from the Texas Rangers, where the phrase "cheeks on the seats" came out, and you know that I've been using that phrase for a long time since. Sports and work in sports is all about the cheeks and the seats. So Bob's looks at how teams sell, cold calling tips, and a lot of stuff that he's learnt over the journey, and as well as what he is helping people with. So here is my chat with Bob Hamer from Sports Business Solutions. Very happy to welcome Bob Hamer, at Sports Biz Bob, as he's known on Twitter, founder and president of Sports Business Solutions to the Sports Geek podcast. Welcome, Bob.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me, Sean.
No problems. I really wanted to chat with you. You've got a long history in sports, and especially in the ticketing and sales side, and also helping people get into the sports business. What was your first gig? What was your first job in the world of sports?
Yeah, so my first job, I was an intern for the Charlotte Bobcats back in the summer of 2005. It's kind of the first job, I guess full-time position I had in sports.
And what did that role entail?
Yeah, so I was a group sales intern. So I was assisting the sales team with doing a lot of the administrative duties that go with ticket sales and trying to free them up so they could have a little bit more time to go out and generate new business, go out and try to make more sales. So good learning experience. Got to see the sales process firsthand. Got to really assist, a large group, and not only just learn, but get some real kind of practical experience, kind of being involved in the sales process, and got to work on a couple of research projects as well, talking to some other teams around the league, and develop some good contacts there during the internship. And then when I came back to finish school, I followed up with one of those contacts that I made, and they helped get me to a hiring manager at the Phoenix Suns when I finished school, and that's how I got my full-time job in sports.
And so you had a long history, and if you look at Bob's LinkedIn profile, you can see the steady progression through the sales process and through the sales infrastructure at the Phoenix Suns. What are some of the lessons you've learned from a sales and a ticket sales point of view in your role at the Phoenix Suns?
Yeah, so at the Phoenix Suns, my tenure there very quickly. I spent 8 years with the Suns. I started in an entry-level ticket sales position and grew over the course of my tenure to become the VP of Sales and Service. So I spent 4 years as a seller full-time, and then 4 years as a manager, director, and ultimately VP. And, I learned a lot over throughout my time there. I think I got into the job, and I'd never been in sales before. I didn't know how it was going to go. I didn't know if I was going to be good at it. I didn't really know what to expect. And so I figured I would give it a little bit of time and see how I did, see how I liked it, and kind of let things go from there. And it turned out that I really enjoyed the work. And figured that was the career I wanted to pursue. And, after giving it, I said I'd give it a year, and I ended up spending 8. So I really did enjoy it and was able to build a nice career with the Suns. But I guess the lessons that I learned along the way, in sales is, there's a lot of things that I think are really important. Work ethic is huge. So the more calls that you make, the more conversations that you have, the more you typically sell. So work ethic has to be there. Attitude is really important. So controlling the things you can control. If you're not excited about what you're doing day in, day out, you're not excited when you're talking to prospects, they're not going to be excited to buy from you. So I think attitude and controlling what you can control is really important. You got to be consistent, so I think you can't get too high when you're having a good run or being successful, and you can't get too low when you're struggling. You got to focus on a process and really the day-to-day aspects of the job. And if you consistently have good days, they turn into good weeks and good months and good campaigns. And so, I think trying to be consistent, I think is really, really important too. And you gotta be a little bit fearless, a little bit tough. I mean, it's a very difficult job. The sales game is a lot of outbound calls. You're getting hung up on. People aren't always open to talking to you. So you got to be able to deal with that rejection and maintain a positive attitude and keep working hard. So those would be a couple of things that I think are really important that I learned along the way.
I think the important bit there is sort of how you went into the role going, no sales experience, not sure if that is you, and the fact that, sales teams and when they're set up correctly, if you have that process and you have, your call scripts and things like that it can give you, enough, I guess, running lanes to start getting, if you follow that process enough. And like you said, if you put in the calls, then you start to understand and get the process and understand where those wins can be made. Is that the real important bit of that early, that awkward giraffe walking sort of early first few months when you're in that role to figure out how you're going to do this? When a lot of people coming into those early roles, they have no experience in sales.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And when I first started, we had call scripts, and I read directly off of the script for probably the first couple of years I was there. And, I think my mentality going into the job was I was humble enough to admit that, I'd never been in sales before. I'd never sold tickets before. My first full-time job in sports. And the people above me had been very successful at it. And so I made it my goal to try to learn as much as I could and ask a lot of questions. And they rolled out a process at the Suns, and I focused on following it. So that meant reading off of the script and sticking to the game plan and not really deviating, and really putting all my trust and faith in my leadership team there. And I believed that they were going to put me in the best position to succeed. And so I followed that path, and it worked out for me. But yeah, early on, it sounded robotic, and it sounded like I was reading off of a script, and I was. But over time, the more repetitions, the more practice you get at it, you get more confident, you get more comfortable, and the script begins to sound more natural. But I'm a big believer in scripting and continual training when you first start out, because it's a very difficult skill to learn, and we don't have any experience. Sticking to what works, I think, is really important.
Yeah, the thing I'm really fascinated in talking with people in the US and how sales focused is, and that most pro teams and a lot of the NCAA teams will have a sales team working the phones, chasing down leads, whether it be a group sales focus. I spoke to Chris Eppenfeld at the Bobcats about his sales team he has there. I've spoken to Aaron Valley and the fact that they do about 6,000 in group sales for each Galaxy game. It's a real focus in the US, and it's not something, looking at the Australian market that we have that strong, sales team focus, but it's a real backbone for a lot of US sport from a ticketing revenue point of view, isn't it?
Yeah, are you talking about the group sales side?
Yeah, the group sales side.
Yeah, so actually I graduated from our entry level program at the Suns to a group sales account executive. So I sold group tickets for 3 years, and then became the group sales director, where I managed that team. And it was a huge piece of our overall ticket sales business, and not just in terms of the volume of tickets that we sold, but in terms of the dollars and cents and the revenue. So I think the benefit is twofold. One, it's helpful on the revenue side, but it's a great way to fill your building as well. And group sales is, driven by the experience. It's not driven by your team performance. And so it's a good way to fill your building and fill some of the gaps when your team isn't driving as much of that with their own performance. And so I think group sales is offers you a little bit of creativity, and you can really build programs and experiences for youth groups and youth sports teams and schools, churches, nonprofit organizations, businesses. And, I think it's a lot of fun and a great way to fill your building when your team isn't playing as well.
So from your early days of the Suns, so like 2006, 2007, and moving to that group sales space, the whole data and the analytics side, and I'm talking more on the business side of things, has really developed the smarts in the CRM space and the ability to get more data and running competitions. How much has that changed what you're doing, and I guess the quality of leads that are coming through to salespeople that are chasing down those leads?
It's been a huge shift, Sean, and in a hot topic in sports business over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. When I first got there to the Suns, and they were one of the more progressive teams in terms of data and analytics, but it was nowhere near what it is now, and it's come a long way. And I think it used to be, teams would start with a call list, or a very simple list of single game buyers and past canceled season ticket holders and people that have sampled the product, and that was just about it. And now we have so many more data points. You can track by their history in terms of which games they're attending, how many games they're attending. You can see if we have an email on file, if they're engaging with us on email. Are they opening our emails that we're sending? Are they clicking on things on the emails that we're sending? Are they engaging with us on social media? Tenure, how long have they been a season ticket holder with us? I think there's so many, again, data points that we're able to utilize to build a customer profile and do a complete audit of our current base and utilize the model to go out and look for like-minded prospective buyers. And by dropping in some of those data points, you could really start to determine who truly are your best leads to be calling on. And if you're putting your sales staff in front of the best leads, you're gonna optimize their performance in ways that we just didn't do 4, 5, 6 years ago. And so I think a lot of those things, having them now is a huge advantage, and the teams that are having a lot of success in sports business are the ones that are really utilizing that and leveraging those data points to drive performance for sure.
And the thing is now, I mean, it's just as much important for the sales staff to be recording those little snippets of information and putting it back into the system, whether it's, knowing about a certain birthday or knowing what they're, from the things that you can pick up from the conversation. So if you pick up the call the next time, you've got those notes and they're in the system, and so you can go back to to call back to them to build that rapport, because more and more fans want that personalization. We're pushing that personalization through the email channels, and it's getting far more personalized in everything that's being done. But you also want to sort of carry that over into the phone call and the conversation, so there is that rapport with whoever you're talking to.
Yeah, and you want to make it organic too, right? So I think it's nice to get a survey out and just have them opt in for a lot of those things, but I think the best form of service is just asking a lot of questions and getting to know our customers, and then tracking it on the back end and referencing those notes and those conversations, and little things along the way. If you're talking to them and they're taking a family vacation over the summertime and it's the off season in the NBA, and you're able to track those things. And then when you follow back up, if you reference the vacation and kids' names and birthdays and their favorite players and what they like to do, and you're able to update that stuff into their profile, you can provide a greater level of service as well, which I think goes a long way when it comes to retaining your current season ticket holders and also attracting new ones. So again, having CRM systems in place and a mechanism there to track all of those things and utilize it from a service standpoint is a great advantage.
And there is that trend as the dollar value, as you become more valuable to the team, to sort of really push that one-on-one. I see a lot of teams rolling out, Bob is your representative. He is your way into the club. You can, this is, if you want anything, go to them. There's a lot of teams that are moving to that model where you start getting that one-on-one, and you build the fan builds a rapport with their, whether it's a customer representative or fan representative, depending what it's termed, but it starts to help build up that relationship rather than you're calling in and there's a call center and you could get anybody. I think that's a real important point of, building up that emotional tie with the team.
Yeah, I mean, it really helps develop an affinity for the team and for the brands, So I think if you're just rolling out your renewals and you don't have any sort of relationship with anybody that's working there, I mean, you're gonna win back the casual fan, the one that wants to be there. But I think really you can make a huge difference, with the accounts that are maybe on the fence. If you have a dedicated person, you have a relationship with them, what's important to them and why they're buying. You almost want to come back because you have a good relationship there and you feel like you're part of the team versus, just getting an invoice every year to sort of renew your ticket. So the teams, and all the data supports this, the teams that have a dedicated service and retention group consistently win back more business and renew more accounts just because of that relationship. And it shows that they're investing in the customer. And again, the more that they know about them, they develop a stronger relationship, not just with the team, but with their person, and I think it increases their chances of renewing their seats, which I think is, and all the data would support that. So, and a lot of teams have followed that trend.
One of the things that I see the difference from the Australian market, and we're seeing the NRL are running out a little bit of the sales team type of process to help the clubs, but the focus really has been, and historically it's always been a member-based clubs, and you're buying your membership and you're a member of the club, and it's really tied to identity as opposed to in the US it's season ticket, and it's a little bit more transactional. But we're seeing a few teams sort of moving to member and trying to call their fans and their season ticket holders members. I know the Kansas City Chiefs are doing it, and a few others are sort of changing the language just to sort of help the fan feel like that they're part of the team. Do you think that's something that that sort of slight move to being a fan and being part of my identity? If it's I'm a Phoenix Suns fan for life, or I'm a Collingwood fan, do you think that helps you as a salesperson it gives you another angle to go in for the sale and to keep them on board, especially from a retention side?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in membership, Sean. I think for a couple reasons. I think sometimes season ticket might have a negative connotation. I think sometimes people think like, wow, I can't afford to attend 44 NBA games, or I can't afford to attend 80 baseball games. I think sometimes they hear that term and they think, well, I could never be a season ticket holder.
Yep.
The Suns were one of those teams that led that charge too, and a lot of NBA teams have. But I think a membership model is more indicative of truly what it is. There's a lot of benefits that we always call season ticket holder benefits, but there's a lot of things beyond just the seats that are a benefit to being part of the team. So I think we kind of changed the vernacular from season ticket to membership, and started to roll out other non-game sort of benefits, so like special events, additional value or discounts at other restaurants in town, access to player and coach events, behind the scenes access type stuff. It's starting to make it more about just the seats and just the game itself, and truly making it feel like if you're a member, you're a part of that franchise, you're part of that team. And I think the fans really resonate with that and want to be a part of something larger than just having seats and renewing their season tickets every year. And so I also think that transcends, wins and losses too, because if there's other value beyond just your seats, you're going to want to stay on board year over year because, you feel like part of the team, like you have almost ownership in it as a member. And so I think for a lot of reasons, teams going to that membership concept are showing and creating more value around your seats than just having tickets to all your games. And I think whether you're winning or you're losing, I think by having a membership and having additional value beyond that is going to increase your retention rates and just build more fan affinity, which is going to help you long term. So I'm a big believer in membership, and we did it at the Suns, and now a lot of teams have gone that way, and kind of following the European soccer model, which I know kind of do it really well.
Well, that's the thing. It does open up, outside the stadium, and you look at big clubs like Real and Barca, and Real have the Madrista, which is their membership program, and I think it is for €20 a year. You get a card that says you're a member, and that's pretty much it. It gives you some digital content, but it allows them to sell membership, start the conversation, put them on that escalator that we all know that sports fans are on, that you can keep upgrading them. But effectively, they charge people €20 to be part of their loyalty program. When we're seeing a lot of other teams rolling out loyalty programs as a bit of a sales funnel for tickets and things like that, it's very monetizable if you sort of just tie that emotional piece to it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a great way to engage a group that maybe can't afford something a larger level spend, or maybe can't afford the season ticket or having tickets to all the games, but they do want to be a part of it. I think giving them a little bit of access to as a sort of a feeder system, I think is a smart approach too. And I always go back to, if you tie in more value, people feel more connected to the team. It's going to build affinity, which will translate into dollars and cents down the road too. People want to be a part of that. So I think, the membership vernacular and everything that it has really been a game changer and helped a lot of teams, and will continue to do so moving forward.
Yeah, and I think there's a real long tail with it as well, because like I'm a Collingwood member and have been for now 12 years, and if I meet someone who says they're a Collingwood fan, I almost, and I say the AFL is so mature in a membership model, it's now at guilt level marketing. Where so if I meet someone, I say, "So are you a member?" And I'm all, the fans are automatically saying, "Well, if you're not a member, you're not truly a fan." Sign up for some reason. So you're starting to get your own fans to become, your marketing ambassadors and ambassadors for the brand, and it's a real powerful way of leveraging your fan base that love your fan, like you said, through thick and thin, through winning, through losing seasons. It's a really powerful way to leverage that fan base.
Yeah, and people want to be a part of a community, and I think the membership that's what it is. It's a community feel, and you don't want to be just a fan. You want to celebrate it with a group of people too. So I think, again, can't say enough positive things about the membership model, and it's going to continue to build in the future too.
So wanted to ask, one of the phrases that I've used on the podcast a couple of times is it's all about the cheeks and the seats. And it's very much been, something that you've been doing over your career, getting more people to games, filling stadiums. So if a team comes to you and says, we need more tickets, we need more single game tickets, or we just need to get more people in, what are some of the first things that you look at to sort of try to address those kind of problems?
In terms of how to fill the building?
How to fill the building. If they just sort of say, this is, we've got this many members, this is how many we've got turning up, what are some of the first things that you look at to say, well, these are some of the things that we can look at to, get more people through the turnstiles?
There's so many parts of that question, or so many ways to answer that, and so many departments that are involved in filling a building for a team. I mean, you naturally would want to look at your I think a couple things. Like, first, when your team's playing well, I mean, naturally it's going to drive demand a little bit, so I think doing an analysis around the market dynamics and kind of your wins and losses is always a piece of that. But I think you first want to look at how many season ticket holders you have, how big is your building, so what's kind of the gap there that needs to be filled, and then how do you fill that through group sales? How do you fill that through individual game sales, so single game ticket purchasing? What kind of community initiatives do you have set up, or organizations that you're working with on the community relations side to get them involved in some capacity? I mean, I think there's a lot of strategies, but then you really got to look at and evaluate your pricing and how that plays into it. So are there areas of your building that you're overpriced or underpriced? Can you be more strategic there through variable and dynamic pricing to maybe drive increase in demand for what we would consider lower demand games by pricing it down? And then dynamically, how do you kind of make up that additional revenue by pricing up some of your higher demand games? And so I think by doing some of those things, you can, you have your season ticket base, which is filling in the seats for all the games, but then you can get a lot more creative in terms of filling kind of your lesser demand games through some of your strategic pricing, through variable and dynamic ticket pricing. And then looking at your big group sales initiatives. So can we go out and develop some theme nights, and some things that will appeal to large groups in that way? Can we get creative with some promotional items, whether it's people love bobbleheads and gifts at the turnstile? Can we get creative with some of those elements to drive single game performance? What's our marketing and digital strategy? There's so many things, Sean. I mean,
it was very much an open-ended question, because you're completely right. There's and working with Melbourne United just in the past season, one of the first things that we did was look at they wanted to fill Hisense Arena, which is the second arena next to Rod Laver, where the Australian Open is played, and then when we looked at the dynamics of the stadium. From a per cap per ticket user, it was actually more profit for them to be selling single game tickets than memberships. And the thing is, if you want to, and their strategy was, well, we need to grow the game. We need to get more people coming to our games. If we were very successful in a membership space, we would have a full stadium, and then only 10,000 people would be seeing the games. And that's not what they wanted. They didn't want to close down the market. They wanted to open up the market. So it formed the whole strategy that it was, let's sell more single game tickets. Let's push people to themed events. Like you said, we'll have a T-shirt giveaway on the first night, and we'll have someone will win a car at another game. And And it really drove the whole strategy for the season because they did that analysis of where the tickets are. So it's a bit of that step back and sort of start seeing the opportunities and then diving in on a campaign to tackle them.
Yeah, and then, it's also looking at your staffing as well. So, how big your sales staff is, how big your service and retention team is. I mean, if you're light in retention reps, maybe if you increase there, you can win back more of your season ticket holders, and you have to theoretically fill in less of the gaps the following season. But the power of variable dynamic pricing, is you can lower prices in certain areas where you have excess availability, but then you can increase in some of your higher demand areas to sort of still win and capture that revenue, I guess, or win back some of that. And I think the worst place that you want to be, though, Sean, is where you're like, hey, I've got a lot of seats to fill. Let's just drop the pricing across the board and fill it up because.
That is that papering the stadium with free tickets just sets the market for knowing that there's cheap tickets all the time, and it makes it even harder to get them back. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, can't do that, and it devalues the product, and it hurts the value, and it's very difficult once you drop the pricing to get the higher rate. So it's it's definitely one of those strategies. And there's been times where you're looking at some of these games and you're like, wow, like we got to fill the building, we got to do something, but you got to look at the long term as well, and you got to understand that if you drop the pricing significantly or devalue your product, it's very difficult to get it back. So I know that's one thing you definitely do not want to do.
No, yeah, I completely agree because it just conditions the market to know that there are free tickets, cheap tickets, for your product, and then it makes it very tough to make them pay full price or near full price ever again. So, one other thing I wanted to touch on: you're very well connected in the sports business industry. I'm sure you're similar to me, having people coming out of college saying, "How do I get into sports?" It's an exciting business. Or it's at least an exciting business from the outside. There is a lot of hard work, like you said before, with the work ethic. Once you're in the business, it's not as glamorous as it appears on TV. What are some of the tips that you give people, young up-and-comers, students, interns, and those kind of things on how to break into the sports industry?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I think you want to do your research first. You want to look at the job boards. You want to look at the jobs and read the descriptions and figure out what's truly out there and what goes into those jobs. So you want to do informational interviews and talk to people that work in sports and ask them questions about what they do. And the more knowledge that you have of those jobs, the more you can start to think like, I do want to do this and I don't want to do that. And I've always been a believer that you should focus all your energy and all your efforts on going after the jobs that you're best suited for and that you're really passionate about. I think, and I dealt with this a lot in the sales world, people just, I'd say the majority of entry-level jobs in sports, at least here in the States, are going to be in ticket sales. But a lot of those job seekers, they don't want to sell. They just think it's, hey, I'll get into sales and I'll move to marketing or I'll move to social media. The skills and the experience is totally different, and if you don't want to sell, you're going to struggle to have success in sales. And if you're not succeeding in sales, teams very rarely just say, hey, you're not working out here, we'll just move you to another department. So, and also I think when I was interviewing, I really wanted to talk to people and try to vet out if they really wanted to sell. And if I didn't feel like they were invested in doing that work that I was hiring for, they very rarely got a job. And so, I think the more research that you do and the more knowledge you have, then you focus your efforts on what you like to do and what you're qualified to do. And then naturally, if you have more passion for that type of work, that's going to come through in the interview. And if you really want it, you have a better shot at getting those offers. So once you know what you want to do, you got to aim to get some experience. So internships, volunteer work, looking at your local community first, pro, collegiate, minor league, all of that experience is great because you want to demonstrate a commitment to working in sports. We saw a lot of people that are just said they were fans of the team and that's why they wanted to work in sports. And you really haven't, but they didn't have any experience or anything. So it's hard to justify that they were committed to working in sports for the right reasons. So the way people can show that commitment is educational. So you can manage or major in sport management or something like that. Major, minor, any sort of educational curriculum is helpful. Internships, volunteer work. If you're working for free, you're showing your commitment there. I think all that stuff is great. If you're involved in a student organization or a sport management club, with another group of students. That's great. Anything that you can get onto if you travel to workshops, if you listen to these podcasts, like anything that you're doing there that can show you're motivated and passionate to work in the business of sports, I think helps you, because if you don't have any of those things and you just say you're a fan of the team, that's not really what we're looking for. We're looking for people that have a passion to work on the business side of sports. And so I'd say doing your research, getting your experience, and going after the jobs that you truly want are all important. Building a network is huge, and having relationships with people in the industry that can help you get connected, I think, is very, very important. And then the last piece I would say is cast a wide net. I talk to a lot of people that say, hey, I really want to work and I want to be in New York and I want to work for the Yankees. And I, as much as I would love to make that happen, like if you're all in on just one team and it doesn't work out, then it's harder to get into the industry. So, it's already very difficult to get in, and you want to give yourself as many opportunities as possible. So I say, once you know the type of jobs you want, cast a really wide net, be open to different leagues, different teams, different markets. Although the sports themselves are different, Sean, the business of sports is very similar across the industry. And so I'd say casting a wide net will give you a better shot. And the more irons you get in the fire, the better your chances of getting in.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially that there is a bit of that romance around, I'm a fan of the team, I want to work for the team because it'll be cool. But like you said, and I think when I was in Minnesota with Ted Johnson from the Timberwolves, you have to weed out those jock sniffers, the ones that just want to hang around, the athletes and feel like they're part of sports, because the important part is, it's sports business, and you want people who are focused on the business side of things, that are happy to work in sports, because it is a tremendous roller coaster ride of ups and downs and wins and losses and great team environment. It's terrific in that sense. But if you're not producing results, whether it be sales or creating great content or that kind of thing, you're not going to cut it, because they don't want fans behind the scenes. They've got enough in the stands. So I completely agree on that side, and yeah, definitely taking any opportunity. One of the things that I see a lot is same thing, people saying, I want to work for the Yankees, and it's like, well, if you were to look at the athletes on the field, they played in the minors. They did all the hard yards in the minor leagues to get where they are. There's so many opportunities at collegiate level, minor leagues, grassroots sports, to prove that you know what you're doing, and also you should be using the tools and using the skills that you want to demonstrate. So if you want to get into sales, there's plenty of sales jobs out there. There's plenty of things that you can get into. If you want to work in digital, then you should be knowing how to use all of the platforms and connecting with all of those people. So I think there's a bit of that, and for mine, they should start doing it yesterday. Not, I'm about to graduate now, I'm starting to connect with everybody. It should be an ongoing process for your career to continue doing that.
Yeah, and if you want to work, I agree. And if you want to work in marketing, talk to people that are doing marketing. What are they doing? What skills does it take? What experience can you gain? Anything like that is really helpful, because then when you interview for a job, you can say, hey, here's kind of what I've done, and you can tailor your experience and your resume based on the duties of that position. And I think oftentimes, especially in sales, people they'll say that they want to work in marketing, or they want to be on operations or a general manager, and they've done nothing, to show why they're qualified to sell. And listen, I had never been in sales before full time, but I'd waited tables. I was comfortable, meeting strangers and talking to people. I was proactive. I was ambitious. And I told them, I said, look, I don't know if I want to sell for the next 10 years. I've never been in it before, but I'll tell you what, I have a passion for this business. I want to learn how to do this at the highest level, and I promise I'm going to do whatever I can to be as good at it as I possibly can. And if it doesn't work out, then that's okay. But I really want this opportunity. And so even though I didn't have the experience, I think if you're in it for the right reasons, and then I had internship experience, I had volunteer experience, I was able to demonstrate a commitment to working in sports. And fortunately, they gave me an opportunity. But I would say for all job seekers and interviewers, ask for the job as well. I think don't just go through the process or submit an application. We got 500 resumes for a position when we post at the Suns, and very rarely did we get to go through all of them. And so apply, follow it up, LinkedIn, social media, connecting, work your network a little bit, call and try to get to a hiring manager. And then when you get an interview, give it everything you have, prepare, ask questions. And when you sit down, speak with confidence and show your passion for the work and for the job and ask for it, And I think I wanted to feel that the interviewer really wanted the job when I interviewed them. You could tell the ones that go through the motions and the ones that really want it. And we can teach you how to sell. You can't teach passion, energy, enthusiasm, and excitement. Those are all things you can control. And so I would say when you get to that point, don't hold back. Give it everything you got.
Completely, and it is take on any role. And again, if you make those connections with people and you ask them, what were some of the jobs that you did in your first role, you'll find out that people who are now in VPs and in senior positions right now, they probably wore a mascot outfit at one instance. They probably handed out flyers at a game at one instance. They've set up marquees. They've done everything, because that's how the sports business works. It's everyone's got to pull their weight, and there's if there's a task to be done and it has to be done and no one's there to do it, you've got to do it. So there's a bit of do everything and that hustle that you just got to have if you want to work in sports.
Yeah, because I agree. The hours are long, the days are long, the game nights and weekends and holidays. And, you got to have a true passion for it. And it's a lifestyle commitment, and it's a ton of fun to be around the games and around the experience, and to help others experience kind of the magic of pro sports is really special. But it's a grind too. So you got to be in it for the right reasons. And you got to be in it for passion for the work, not because you want to hang around with the players. That stuff will wear off, and people that are more interested in the players than they are the work don't end up, very rarely get in, and if they do, they don't make it long term. So I agree with you there.
So I'm just going to wrap up with 5 questions that I wrap up my interviews with. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I don't specifically, but I would guess it was an Angels baseball game when I was a kid. I remember going to Angel baseball games when I was a kid in California.
And in your long sports business career, you would have gone to many sports events. What's your favorite food at a sports event or a stadium?
I got 2, and I'm a sucker for it. It's a hot dog and nachos. I just can't. I can't go to a game and not get it, Sean. And I always, I don't always feel great after, especially if I have a couple of hot dogs. But something about the concession fare, I can't avoid it.
Oh, terrific! What's the first app you open in the morning when you pick up your phone?
Twitter.
And who should the Sports Geek podcast listeners follow, and why? Whether it be a Twitter follow or a writer or a blog. Who do you suggest they should be following?
Can I say myself?
I've got a friend of mine, Steve Sematino, says the phrase, "The best form of promotion is self-promotion." So I will definitely allow that, Bob.
Yeah, this is my shameless plug here, Sean. But yeah, I would say follow me. I'm at SportsBizBob. I do daily tips of the day. I blog and I write on sports sales, sports business. I have a passion for helping other people succeed in the industry. And, for those that are in it and that aspire to be in it, I'd love to help any way I can. So I like to think I'm a pretty decent follow on Twitter at SportsBizBob.
I will concur with that, Bob. Definitely worth a follow. Last question. What is your social media platform MVP?
When you say MVP, like the one that I utilize the most?
Yeah, so which platform is, of all the platforms that are out there, what would you name your MVP?
I'd say LinkedIn. And I utilize all of them: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I would say LinkedIn because, my target audience and the people that I speak to are sports business professionals and people that, have an interest in I don't know if it's learning or getting better at their craft. And that's kind of the audience I'm trying to reach. And so for true business content and educational purposes, I think a lot of people come to expect that and look for that on LinkedIn. But if you're on Facebook, if you're on Instagram, they're looking for other engagement. So in my opinion, in terms of blogging and corresponding and connecting with people in more of a more of a business way, I would say LinkedIn has probably been my MVP. But I think there's a lot of value in all of them, and I utilize them all. But I would say I get the most return in terms of like views and engagements on LinkedIn, because I think my audience is looking for that on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I agree. We're both very active on LinkedIn in both connecting and putting content on there, and it is one of the phrases I use is it's Facebook for suits. It is the business version of what Facebook is, and so it's a really great way to connect with, and I've connected with a lot of people in the sports industry, via LinkedIn, and it's a really great way to do that. I will put a link to your LinkedIn for people who have not connected. I would think that there's a high propensity of Sports Geek podcast listeners that you're already connected with Bob. Yeah. But I'll put a link in the show notes. People can find you, as you said, at SportsBizBob, and also sportsbusiness.solutions is where you'll find Bob's business, Sports Business Solutions. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Of course, Sean. Thanks for having me on. I guess very quickly in closing, I appreciate being here. And my business, I do a lot of sales training, consulting, recruiting for sports teams, sports properties across really all teams, all leagues, all markets. And so, I have a real passion for, helping people succeed in the business. And I also, work with a lot of college students and recent grads, helping people get jobs in sports. And so I enjoy networking and getting to know new people. I enjoy helping any way that I can. So if I can do that in any way, for anyone that's listening to the podcast, don't hesitate to reach out, connect with me on social media, reach out to my website, sportsbusiness.solutions, and it'd be great to meet you. But I appreciate you having me on, Sean. Thank you.
No problems. We have to get you down to Australia sometime.
Yeah, next time we do this, Australia for sure. We'll have to do this one face to face.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now.
Thanks again to Bob Hamer from Sports Business Solutions. You can find and tweet Bob at SportsBizBob. Terrific handle at. He's very active on Twitter, and as we sort of touched on there with his most valuable network, his MVP social network, LinkedIn. Bob and I are very prolific on LinkedIn. We both really like it as a platform, especially from a business to business point of view, and especially to connect in the sports business world. So I'd really be interested in how you go about using LinkedIn. One, if we are not connected, please send me a connection invite. I'm a real fan of LinkedIn. I would like LinkedIn to provide a better default message every time you click on the connect button, because in different environments, whether you're on desktop or mobile, sometimes it will force you to put in a message, and other times it will just send the cookie cutter message. I think that would be a massive improvement for LinkedIn if you were able to say, hey, I'm Sean, I do a podcast on sport, I like connecting with people in sports business, would you like to connect? I think that would be a better default message for me. But if you are sending me a message and you are a listener, please let me know. Either send me the connect and I'll reply, or I'll accept. But if you come back and say, hey, I listen to the podcast, I'd really appreciate that feedback. I've been doing a little bit of experimenting with LinkedIn over the past 6 months, just seeing how the platform works and seeing people's, appetite to connect. And I'm definitely seeing a shift in both the way that LinkedIn is working, but also the way people are using LinkedIn. I think early on, and as I've said earlier, I've been on LinkedIn for many, many years. Back in my geek days, getting people signed up when I was working at AGL, a power company over here in Australia. And we were going through a downsizing and outsourcing, regime's the wrong word, project. Everyone was effectively losing their jobs. It wasn't a great time to be managing around 40 staff. But one of the things that I did do is I got everybody on LinkedIn. And sort of said, look, guys, it's going to be a really powerful network, knowing everybody that you once worked with. So I was a really early adopter on LinkedIn and understanding how to use it. And I've used it pretty aggressively on building out my network from a sports geek point of view and connecting with people in the US and the UK and around Australia. So it's been really important for that. And so I've just sort of been testing it. They used to have LinkedIn Connected, which was a bit of an app that pretty much LinkedIn would suggest people for you to connect with. And I think that's where the shift has come for mine. 7 or 8 years ago, LinkedIn was really, really tough on, you must know the person and only connect with those people. But I'm seeing more and more people connecting, having looser connections on LinkedIn is probably the best way of putting it. Connecting with people that are in adjacent industries or work in the same area, and people are more willing to connect. I know there are still people that have personal policies of, I have not met that person in real life, I'm not going to connect with them, and I respect that. But I also think there's a lot of people that are seeing the opportunity of both having a wider network, but then also seeing LinkedIn as a content discovery platform. I put a lot of content into LinkedIn. Everything that I read and everything that gets tweeted out also gets pushed into LinkedIn using Buffer as the tool to send it into LinkedIn. And it's not my primary platform to read content, but I do know it's a primary platform for a lot of people. And I use the phrase that LinkedIn is Facebook for suits. Not that I've worn a suit for many years, but it's definitely Facebook for the corporate environment. And so there are a lot of people that are using it as professional development and those kind of things. So I've sort of been testing both how many people will connect with me. I was using LinkedIn Connected for a little while before I got retired earlier this year. I was using LinkedIn Connected a little bit like Tinder. Swipe right and ask for a connect. Swipe left if they weren't in the sphere and the roles that I wanted to talk to. And it's seen my a real big growth in sport as an industry in my connections. So I think I've gone from 5,000 connections to nearly 20,000 connections, connecting with a real tight focus around sport, technology, and that intersection, which is where I play as sports geek. And it's starting to serve up some really interesting opportunities coming back to me on what people are engaging with, what type of content they're engaging with, and that it is a different beast to the Facebooks and the Twitters of the world. And it's quite remarkable now that I have more LinkedIn connections than Twitter followers, and I've had people ask which one's more valuable, and I'm like, well, LinkedIn is far more valuable because they're all real people, and also you still have the ability, and again, hopefully LinkedIn don't turn it off, to download those email contact details from your LinkedIn connections. So far more valuable than when comparing to Twitter, which doesn't give you that access. So yeah, I'd love to hear how you use LinkedIn. I recently put up a question asking people if they wanted any help or had a question answered on LinkedIn, and answered a few questions there. I'm going to do that more often to keep that group engaged. And yes, if we have not connected, please rectify that. I do my best to try to find everybody that potentially might listen to the podcast, but if we haven't connected, please do so. And I guess if I have some quick takeaway advice on LinkedIn is get your vanity URL sorted. In my case, it's linkedin.com/in/Sean Callanan. It just makes it a little bit easier to send out. It sort of shows a little bit more professionalism, matches it up with your other things, and I'm really surprised. One, it's a bit on LinkedIn's. It's a bit of a fault of LinkedIn that they haven't pushed that really hard in the same way that Facebook said, claim your username. I think LinkedIn should push it a little bit harder, because it would result in LinkedIn URLs being on business cards and the like, which I think they should be. So I think if you haven't done that, just Google, how do I set up my LinkedIn URL, and go from there. And the only frustrating thing for LinkedIn is all those single word reviews that you get on LinkedIn, where people say, Sean is good at digital marketing or sports, and a lot of them are served up via an algorithm. They will say, hey, Todd, do you recommend Sean for this? And most people will see it and click yes, or or go forward. And that's fine. Again, I'm not disparaging that. But it's when one or two skills get in front of the others that LinkedIn will keep serving it. And so the only bugbear I have is that I've got a low rating for podcasting. So if you feel the need, if you're in LinkedIn at any point, please give me a +1 for podcasting. I would like to see that join my 99 plus club on my LinkedIn profile. I think that's the only gap I have. So again, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Sports Geek podcast. My name is Sean Callanan. At the end of this podcast, the sounds of the game this week is from the Adelaide Oval. Adelaide United versus the Western Sydney Wanderers. Great spectacle at Adelaide Oval. It was thanks to Rob Scilaciotti for inviting me down. It was a great game. Just over 50,000 people in attendance, and great to see the Adelaide United finally rewarded with a win. And just on that, we ran a Snapchat filter over Adelaide Oval for the 4 hours that the game was on, and allowed people to put their face inside the A-League trophy. If you haven't seen the A-League trophy, it's a circular trophy. It's sometimes known as the toilet seat. So we created a filter, a geo filter, that allowed people to put their face in the A-League trophy. Alan Delich, who set it all up, actually shared all the stats and how it went. I think it cost about $120 in the end. And he shared all the stats around the views and the usage at the stadium for the 4 hours. So if you want to know more about that, you know where that is. That is in the Sports Biz Slack community, which you can join by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Slack. There is over nearly 350 people in there now, and we'd love to have you there. And also, voting is still open to help me decide and build momentum around the next big podcast guest. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/tradable. Who do you want me to interview? Shaquille O'Neal, Steve Ballmer, Bill Simmons, David Gallup, Dana White, Todd Greenberg. There's 9 nominees there. Please leave your selection there, and it'll help me convince that person to come on the show. Until next week, my name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek. Cheers.
Like the Sports Geek podcast? Find us on facebook.com/sportsgeek. Want to understand Facebook advertising options? Go to sportsgeekhq.com/FB ads. Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes.